everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady.
I'm Abby.
And I'm Aiden.
And if we look tired, that's because we are. We just did teamwork, dream work, and got a yard of Chapel Hill grit put out in like record time. And by doing that, it's made it so that we now have the space ready for the very last potted tomatoes. And here we are. It's July 6th. We are still planting tomatoes. But the thing is, here in North Carolina, we don't get frost until usually Thanksgiving. So these tomatoes, they're not really going to be producing fruit in the middle of summer. We're already in the middle of summer, right? But they will be giving us fruit late into the season. So it's totally worth doing a July planting. And in theory, at least, we're going to potentially avoid, well, at least we're after early blight, but we're right in the middle of southern blight, which we are experiencing with other tomatoes that are in the ground. And that's why all of these are going into pots. But you guys all know I like a good experiment. And I want to test the limits of the soil. And I've never done this for a YouTube video. So we're going to do some of the tomatoes in my normal compost of choice, Soil Cube organic compost. But then we're going to do others in traditional potting soil. However, neither have any fertilizer embedded in them. And we actually went to Lowe's, which just opened like last week, right down the street. And we got 2 new fertilizers. Will you grab those? And I've actually never used either of these fertilizers before either. So the one that's for tomatoes is an 8-5-1. So that's a pretty high ratio of nitrogen, very low ratio of potassium. And then the all-purpose is what? 7-5-7. My bet is that 7-5-7 is actually going to be better, but we are going to write on labels the variety of tomato, the type of soil, and the type of fertilizer so that at the end of the season, we can share our results with you. So stay tuned for all of our progress. And here you can see where we have all of those tomato pots located. This is on the south side of a north fence, so it gets full sun, easy access to water with multiple hoses. And they just got 3 inches of hurricane rain. So hopefully everything will really start to take off now. You can see we got this pathway re-gridded. And I've never done pots along here, but I think it's really great. The sidewalk is wide enough to accommodate it. We just need to mulch the tops of these pots. I'll do that tomorrow when it dries out. Well, I am down to my last 2 fabric bags, and I have 2 tomato plants left and a handful of peppers. So I'm going to get these potted, placed, and then the last step will be to mulch the tops of every single bag. Now, I'd intended on doing this right after I potted them. However, you just saw that we worked till dark. The last 2 days, we've gotten more than 3 inches of rain. So I'm playing a little bit of catch up, but that's all right. I'm just so relieved to finally have all of the tomatoes for 2021 finally planted for the season. So now that I have finally gotten all of the tomatoes for 2021 either planted or potted, let's take a quick tour so you can see how everything is growing. And we will start right here. in this crescent self-watering container, which is fantastic. You see it has a very healthy squash and Thai basil and also a Rutgers tomato growing right up along the champagne grape on the cattle fence arch. You see the grape is doing great. This year it's finally attaching itself. Well, in here is where all of these recently potted tomatoes are located. You can see this is full sun, really from about 11 a.m. until around 6 at night. It's easy to access. I have 2 hoses that reach this. And I think it's going to be a perfect area that's also really easy to access as far as harvesting goes. Now, as we get around to the east side of the greenhouse, I have some cream sausage tomatoes planted in these 100-gallon root pouches, doing quite well. This side gets shaded around 4:30. So we just potted this one up. Here's everything that's left for me to still plant. So you know I'm never done. But on this side of the greenhouse is where we really have incredible growth and success. So this is the west side of the greenhouse, and you can see that the cucumbers are growing over the greenhouse. And in and amongst here are lots of tomatoes. Most of these are one of my favorite varieties called, I think this was orange banana. I bet I have a label somewhere. But the tomatoes you can see are doing great in amongst the corn and the cucumbers. And I haven't gotten any ripe tomatoes from here yet, but you can see there is lots of fruit being formed. And so far, everything in here has been really healthy. So I definitely am counting all of these pots as a huge success. So here on the back patio, I first have the tower garden filled with different varieties of tomatoes. They're doing really well. So happy to see it. And then over here is where I had some modern hybrids that died from southern wilt last week. So I've replaced those with some more container tomato plants. They've only been here a few days, but they're looking significantly better. The fire pit bed has a lot of tomato plants. Here's a nice big one growing in that, I think, a 7-gallon ornamental pot mixed with a rose and some coleus and even a little conifer down in there. On this side, you can see there's lots of tomatoes coming, nothing quite ripe yet. But again, all of these are in pots or grow bags. And everything in here is doing really well. I'm quite pleased, and I know these will be producing in time for the tomato tasting. In this feed tank, I have a few varieties of tomatoes. I have Roma, or actually San Marzano, planted on the edges and along the back, and then in the middle is this super tasty blackberries, which is right now just starting to go into its red stage. And everything in this feed tank is doing so well. I'm so relieved. In contrast, some in-ground sun gold dying of southern wilt. These have to come out today. And that's just the reality of growing tomatoes in the ground on this property. Of course, the exception to that rule are grafted tomatoes, and you can see these are doing wonderfully. No disease problems whatsoever. So if I want to grow tomatoes in the ground, they absolutely have to be grafted. And all of these contained tomatoes are doing well. You could probably remember that those green bags had been filled with potatoes. They have cream sausage growing in them now. Behind that are the Soil Cube 1 cubic foot bags that I planted tomatoes in, and all of these are doing really great. The driveway tomatoes are doing really well. I've been harvesting quite a few off of these already. You can see this is also in a crescent pot, not self-watering. these get watered every day unless it rains, which has been raining a lot, which is awesome. And on this side, you can see here's another San Marzano that is absolutely covered in fruit, doing great. Also in a crescent container with Rosy Bell strawberry at the base. And then if we walk over here, it's another cream sausage growing in this terracotta pot. I've been struggling with blossom end rot, which really ruins the fruits. There's no point in even letting it mature. And that is caused from periods of dry and excessive wet. And I can tell you I have not allowed this pot to dry out, but I don't find that growing tomatoes in terracotta is a worthwhile experience. Terracotta just, I think it gets too hot and it does dry out really fast. Despite my best efforts of watering this every single day, I'm still dealing with blossom end rot. Of course, tomatoes across the front porch. These are really starting to grow up. So far, no fruit production. These are in the shade by 3 o'clock. But we move over here. This one's doing so well. I've already had to extra stake this. And there is a nearly ripe fruit ready to be harvested right alongside those delicious Snowy Bell strawberries. And just to test the limits, because I haven't grown tomatoes out here in this space for a number of years, I did put some tomatoes in the ground out here in the front foundation bed in hopes that they will not succumb to southern wilt. Time will tell. Now you might be wondering, did I really plan enough for our annual tomato tasting? And the answer is, of course not. I rely on local farmers to help supply the tomatoes that we use at that party. Now the thing is, in the early years of gardening here, I had incredible success with tomatoes. I would easily have 150 plants in the ground all throughout the property. Now the garden was young, I didn't have any shade, and I hadn't awoken all of the diseases and nematodes that impact all of these different varieties of tomatoes, both hybrid and heirloom. So now I'm just happy that I have incredible local sources that I can rely on to make the tomato tasting extra special. By the way, tomato tasting this year is Saturday, August 7th from 6 to 10 p.m. You can buy tickets at the link below, and all proceeds benefit the North Carolina Botanical Garden. Now, if you found this video to be helpful, please give it a like. Be sure to hit that bell notification so you'll know when I post another video. And I appreciate you watching so very much and look forward to sharing more tomato updates as the season continues.